Welcome to the Science of Hockey, the podcast where we break down the science behind ice hockey. I'm the analyst, your host, and every week we explore the data, research, and evidence that shape how we play, train, and understand the game of hockey. From biomechanics to performance psychology, we take you beyond the rink and into the research lab, giving you insights that go beyond hearsay and into what really makes the difference on the ice. Whether you're a player, a coach, a parent, or just someone passionate about the sport, we're here to bring you scientifically backed information in a language that's friendly and easy to understand. So grab your skates and let's dive into the science of hockey. Hello, hockey fans. This is the Science of Hockey, and I'm the analyst. Today, we tackle the injury epidemic in professional male hockey, exploring why matches are so high risk and what measures could protect players. From body checks to overuse issues, discover what puts players at risk and how we can make the sport safer.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be looking into the world of pro men's hockey, but not the stuff you see on TV. You wanted to really understand the risks players face on the ice.
Yeah.
We could dig into the injuries, the causes, and maybe even challenge some assumptions about the sport.
It'll be an eye-opener.
Yeah. We've got some great research to guide us. It's brand new from this year and pulls data from studies over decades. So we get a long-term perspective on injury trends. We even threw in some stats from the International Ice Hockey Federation.
Oh, wow.
Just to spice things up a bit. You ready to get started?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, so how dangerous is pro hockey? What does the data say?
Well, it is a high-risk sport, but the risk is very specific. The injury rate during games is much higher than practice, like sometimes 20 times higher.
20 times. Wow, that's a huge difference. I guess those game day nerves are justified. What kind of numbers are we talking here?
We're looking at about 38 to 88 injuries per 1,000 hours of game time. To compare, that's even more than women's pro leagues,
Right.
which is about 22 injuries per 1,000 hours.
So to really understand the dangers, you need to look at what happens in the games.
Exactly. And to get even more specific, we need to look at where those injuries happen on the body.
I'm ready. Give me all the details.
Okay, well, get ready for a surprise. The lower body is what takes most of the impact. We see a ton of knee injuries from trauma, and the hip and groin area are prone to overuse injuries.
Really? I always thought it'd be all about concussions and head stuff.
It's a common thought, but the data shows otherwise. Lower body injuries make up 27 to 53.7% of all injuries reported.
So, knee pads and maybe some extra hip and groin protection is important. I see why you said pro hockey has specific dangers.
Yeah. Thinking about protection, what comes to mind first?
Definitely strong knee pads. Maybe some more support for hips and groin, like compression shorts or something.
I think you're right on. But to understand why those are so important, we need to look at why these injuries happen. And the research dives deep into that.
All right, let's get into it. What's causing all this damage?
Well, it's not just the fights. Though those definitely contribute. The main culprits are body checking and collisions.
The force of the impact.
Yeah, the force of those impacts.
So we're talking about the physicality of the game itself.
Yeah, exactly. Even rule changes to stop fighting can only do so much. Speed and impact are just part of the sport.
Speaking of impacts, what stands out from the studies about how hard these hits are?
One study found that body checking was the cause in 8 to 50% of injuries. That's a pretty big range and shows how it varies between leagues and how the study was done.
But body checking is a big factor.
Exactly. So before we get into the types of injuries, what do you think these big hits and body checks lead to?
I imagine bruises, cuts, maybe some sprains or broken bones.
You're on the right track. But let's get into the details. Ready for the gruesome part. All right, so the most common injuries are actually not as bad as you'd think. Contusions, which are just bruises, and lacerations, or cuts. Those are the most common.
So bumps and scrapes are just part of the job, huh?
You could say that. But there are also a lot of fractures and joint injuries, and those can be a lot more serious.
So a mix of everyday stuff and then those big injuries. That could affect their whole career.
Exactly. But here's something that might surprise you. Most injuries are minor, meaning players are usually only out for 1 to 7 days.
Really? I would have thought with how intense and fast the game is,
Yeah.
that most injuries would be pretty bad.
Yeah. But those really serious injuries that keep someone out for over 28 days, those do happen, but they are less common. The data is interesting. Hockey has a ton of injuries, but a lot of them are pretty minor.
So if you want to understand the risks in pro hockey, what's the big takeaway?
It's this. It's dangerous. but the danger is specific. Protect the lower body and know that high-speed impacts cause a lot of injuries.
And that goes back to why lower body injuries are so common.
Exactly. Going back to the knee, 2 studies looked at traumatic versus overuse injuries, and they found that the knee was the most injured from trauma.
So those high-speed hits we talked about, they're rough on the knees. What about overuse injuries? You said the hip and groin were vulnerable.
Yeah, the hip and groin area were the most common sites for those overuse injuries, which makes sense when you think about it. Those areas get stressed a lot during a game.
It's weird that even though it's such a high-impact sport, they're still getting overuse injuries.
Absolutely. And that's why prevention strategies need to focus on both. High-impact hits and repetitive stress.
Yeah.
And this is where things get really interesting, because effective prevention can really help players be safer.
Let's talk about that. What are some of the strategies for preventing both types of injuries?
For the high-impact stuff, we have to think about rule changes. For example, some leagues, especially youth and women's leagues, have banned body checking. And the research shows it's been really helpful at lowering injury rates.
So no body checking would really help with those lower body injuries. Do you think the NHL would ever do that?
It's definitely something to talk about. The hard part is that speed and physicality are part of hockey. So even with new rules, collisions are still going to happen.
I guess you can't take all the risk out of hockey.
Exactly. That's why better gear is so important. Imagine equipment that's designed to absorb those big hits, especially around the knees and hips. There's been so much cool stuff happening in other sports with new materials and tech. It could be a game changer for hockey.
Like those high-tech helmets in football.
Yeah.
Could something like that be made for hockey players to protect their lower body?
Absolutely. And we also need to think about training and conditioning.
Right.
Stronger muscles around the knees and hips can really help stabilize those joints. And that makes them less likely to get injured. And even learning the right way to body check and take a hit, that can make a difference too.
So it's not just gear and rules,
Yeah.
but also getting players' bodies ready for the game.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to be a total approach. Equipment, rules, training, and even how coaches coach. And when we talk about overuse injuries, education and awareness are huge. Coaches and players have to understand how important it is to manage how much they play, and recognizing when they are tired or hurting, and to go see a doctor when they need to.
Creating a culture of safety.
Yes, and we can't forget those contusions and lacerations. They might be minor, but they add up over time. And if we can prevent them, why wouldn't we?
That's a great point. What does the research say about preventing them?
It says that gear can make a big difference. Think about jerseys and pants with cut-resistant material and extra padding to protect against bumps and bruises.
What about face injuries? We haven't talked much about head injuries, but the research did mention cuts on the face were common.
You're right. Making full face protection mandatory would be an easy way to lower those injuries. We see it already in under 18 and women's hockey, and the data backs it up.
So there's some stuff from other leagues that could be used in the pros?
Absolutely. And this all shows how important it is to have research and for everyone to work together. Researchers, doctors, and the people who run the leagues. By studying injuries, testing ways to stop them, and sharing what we learn, we can make hockey safer without changing the game.
It's all about balance, keeping players safe without changing the sport.
Exactly. We want players to play at the highest level without putting their health at risk. And if everyone works together, I think we can make hockey safer for everyone.
We've covered a lot today. Types of injuries, what causes them, and ways to prevent them. But there's one more thing I want to talk about, the mental side of injuries.
That's a great point. We've talked a lot about how injuries hurt the body, but they can also hurt mentally and emotionally.
Playing hockey in the pros isn't just about being strong and skilled. It's also about being mentally tough. And injuries can really hurt a player's confidence and motivation.
Yeah. People don't always talk about the fear and anxiety that comes with an injury. Imagine being a player known for speed and agility, and then you hurt your knee and can't play. It can be tough mentally to deal with not knowing when you'll play again and worrying if you'll be the same player.
It's almost like losing part of who you are. And then there's that pressure to get better fast and get back on the ice.
Yeah, that pressure is huge, especially in pro sports where everything moves so fast. Players might feel like they're letting their team down, or their fans, or that their career is over if they don't get better fast enough. And all that can actually slow down how fast they heal.
So how can players get better support for both their mind and body when they're injured?
Well, first, we have to create a culture where people can talk openly and support each other. Players need to feel like they can talk about their struggles, physical and mental.
Without being judged.
Building trust.
Exactly. And that means giving them access to mental health pros, ones who know how to work with athletes, they can help with counseling, coping mechanisms, and strategies for managing stress and anxiety. Recognizing that mental health is just as important as physical health.
Exactly. What do you think about the role coaches and teammates play?
Oh, they're huge. Coaches can really create a supportive environment for the whole team. They can encourage players to take care of themselves and make sure players know it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah, they really set the tone. And teammates can be so encouraging and understanding. It makes a big difference to have that support.
It's about having people there for them, more than just the doctors and trainers.
Exactly. And we can't forget family and friends. They can listen, be there for them, and remind them that they are more than just hockey players.
Reminding them they're important and loved for who they are, not just how well they play.
Yeah, that can make all the difference for getting better and feeling good.
Talk about the mental side of things. It adds a whole new layer to understanding the risks of hockey.
It's super important. We have to think about the mind and body. When trying to prevent and treat injuries,
We've looked at the data, the dangers, and even the mental game. It's been a really cool deep dive into hockey injuries. But now I want to think about the big picture. What does this all mean for the future of hockey? What can we do to make it safer without changing what makes the game great?
I think the key is that this is bigger than just changing a few rules or adding some padding. It has to be a whole new way of thinking, from the pros all the way down to kids playing.
A new way of thinking. What do you mean?
We need to stop just reacting to injuries and start trying to prevent them.
I get it. But how do we actually do that? Where do we start?
Well, a few key areas. First, education and training. Players, coaches, and parents. They all need to understand the risks. They need to know the right techniques. And they need to know how to spot an injury.
So if you know more, you can do more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Finding things early can make a huge difference. The second part is creating a culture of safety and respect at every level. That means really pushing fair play and not letting players do dangerous stuff like headhunting or boarding, and making sure players can speak up if they see something wrong.
So it's like creating an environment where everyone's looking out for each other.
Yeah.
What's the third thing?
The third part is to put money into research and new technology. We need to keep studying injuries, figure out what works to prevent them, and make new equipment to keep players safe.
So it's all about education, changing the culture, and new technology.
It is. And if we look at the bigger picture, this isn't just about lowering the number of injuries. It's also about making them less serious. If we can stop those really bad injuries that end careers, that would be huge.
And that would change things, not just for the pro leagues, but for kids playing and for the whole sport.
Absolutely. It shows that player safety is the most important thing. And like we talked about, we can't forget about the mental and emotional part of injuries. We need to give players the help they need to recover and to stay mentally strong.
It's about taking care of the whole person.
Exactly. I really think that this new way of thinking, focusing on preventing injuries and taking care of the whole player, is super important for the future of hockey.
It's been an amazing deep dive into hockey injuries. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge with us.
It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners,
Yeah.
if you want to learn more about this stuff, check out the show notes for links to the research we talked about.
There's a lot of good stuff out there.
And as we finish up, I want to leave you with something to think about. Knowing everything we talked about today, what would you change about hockey to make it safer, without changing what makes the game so fun? It's something to think about as we all try to make hockey exciting and indeed safe for everyone who loves it. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
Thanks for tuning in to the Science of Hockey. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to share it with your friends, teammates, or anyone who loves hockey as much as you do. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment to let us know what you liked, what you'd like to hear next, or any questions you have. Your feedback helps us make the show even better. Until next time, keep your skates sharp, your mind open, and keep chasing the science behind the game.